All right, folks. Hello, everyone. Looks like we're streaming. So today we are going to start a new painting. Um, I think so. The last painting that I was working on from Anna, um, I think we'll see where put her back up here. So you remember Anna? So I did um, throw her painting in a frame. Let's see, right here. And I've got it hanging on my wall, and I'm just kind of letting it dry. And kind of, I walk past it. It's on my stairwell from my downstairs living room to my upstairs dining room, so it's kind of hanging on the wall there. And when I walk by it, I definitely am already noticing some things that I want to fix. Maybe her hair a little bit. Um, and when I look at the picture of her, her nose seems to be the right length. But in the painting, I mean, the measurement looks fine, but for some reason the nose still kind of bugs me. So what I'll do is I'll just let it hang on the wall and let it kind of grow on me a little bit. And in a couple days I'll take it down and fix any weirdness. But I did post the image to my social media, and I posted it here obviously as well. But Anna saw it and she loved it. I can't wait for her to see it in person. Um, so I figured it was time to get started on a new painting. We'll see. We'll see. I had a hard time picking the painting that I wanted to do, or the portrait that I wanted to do. But I ended up on this one of Allie. I mentioned that most of her pictures, she had a big toothy smile in it, but then I forgot we had these where she was kind of facing the sun, and she wasn't nearly as smiley as the other ones. So I'm kind of on the fence. I love this picture of her, but but I don't know if it captures her personality 100%. So I'm kind of on the fence. So I figured I'd start a painting of her and see how I felt about it, in a couple days or whatever, and maybe just finish it. And then if I decide later down the road I want to do one that more matches what I think her personality is, which is like big smiley. I think I was telling you guys that she just in 95% of the pictures that we took, she's just got this big toothy smile. But I do love this, and it's definitely one of my favorites from the day. So um, I figured that'd be a good one to get started on. I really don't. I really don't want to paint teeth. Um, and I saw this one, and I was like, "Oh, this solves all my problems." So last time we left off, I cleaned my palette, so I don't have any colors laid down, and I've got it somewhat scraped off. Excuse me, I just had dinner and I'm all stuffed up, um, but I figure what we would do is squeeze out some paint. Maybe I'll talk you through my colors again, and then maybe we'll get a sketch started. It's 8 o'clock here. It's been a long week. I don't know. I mentioned it, but I'm doing training. I'm not thankfully doing the training, but I'm hosting training for work, and there's 3 sessions a day, and so the first one is at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is fine. But my team meeting is at 7 in the morning, so that was yesterday on Wednesdays, and so I think I mentioned yesterday was almost 10 minutes away from being a 12-hour day, and actually it was because I always before my 7 a.m. call I get on about 6:30 and do a little preparation and update some documents and stuff, and then we went all the way the last. So the training, there's 3 trainings a day. The first one is at 8, Then there's a kind of mid-morning one, and then there's one that goes from 6 to 7. And so I've been getting off work at 7 every night, which is kind of a bummer. But it's only so tomorrow. I've only got 2 training sessions, and thankfully I don't have one in the evening, and then next week I have off. So I'll be able to get a little rest and relaxation. But anyways, I'm to where I'm going with this is I'm tired, and starting a new painting can be a little stressful, getting the sketch right and all that. So we'll see how it goes. But at least wanted to squeeze out some colors and maybe talk you through them. I've got them pretty much how they're laid out in my palette. Typically, for tonight, I probably am only going to use a couple colors, but but let's talk about them anyways, and I'll squeeze them out. So, and then it's kind of weird. I have for some reason I bought a bunch of these Gamblin whites just because I use so much of it. But I typically use M. Graham for my colors and for my oil paint. And something that I like about them is their walnut oil is their base instead of linseed oil. And I don't know if it's the walnut oil or M. Graham in general. These are the only walnut oil paints I've ever used. And what I love about it is just the consistency. All of these paints, they kind of squeeze out of the tube the same, regardless of the color. Like Gamblin is, I like Gamblin fine, and it's not that big of a deal. But some of their colors just pour out of the tube, almost like baby oil or olive oil, like just too runny. And then some of them, like their umbers and stuff, and their earth tones, I mean, they come out of the tube like cake batter or butter. And so what that affects is when you're mixing colors. So when you grab out of your clean pile to mix color, depending on the color, you have to dip your brush into that color in a different way. And you don't notice it all the time, but what you'll notice is like you'll go to grab a color, dip it into your pile, and it's like, holy cow, that's just too much paint. Or it's usually not that big a deal if it's not enough paint. You don't really notice it, but you'll notice it. You definitely notice it if you take a CAD color or a Viridian or a Phthalo and mix it into a pile of color. And if you've got too much of those colors, you basically those colors are so powerful that you just have to wipe your whole pile up and start over. So, and the nice thing about the M. Grahams is you just don't have to think about it. You just squeeze it out. They all kind of squeeze out the same consistency within a few degrees, I guess. But for the most part, what I like about them most is they're just so consistent. Probably a little more expensive than, say, Winsor, Newton, or Gamblin. But it's kind of gross. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't have to say anything gross. But I guess where I want to go with this is, for me, oil painting is like anything else. I don't have too many expensive hobbies, except photography maybe. But but I mean, the color and the vibrancy and the ease of use of your paint and your materials and your brushes is all kind of relates to, for me, the excitement of oil painting. So if you're fighting your paint, that just takes away from the enjoyment. So the last thing I want to do as an oil painter is to fight with my paint in any way. And on the other end of it, I love transparent red oxide. It's by far my favorite color, and it's just magic when you squeeze it out of the tube or when you put it on your panel. It's just magic. And same with the CAD red light. And I definitely have strong feelings about all these colors. And I love the smells of them. There's so many reasons I love oil painting, but but Yeah, just wonderful colors. I can't recommend them highly enough. Yes, you'd be fine with Winsor & Newton. I used Winsor & Newton for years. Fine using Gamblin for years. But I started taking the workshops from David Gray, and he used M. Graham, the first way that I noticed it was like he was doing a portraiture workshop, and he used transparent red oxide, and he published a materials list before the workshop, and I was using Gamblin pretty much primarily at the time, and so he pushed out transparent red oxide, and I know some of my favorite painters used it. I mean, you know, Kylon Q uses it. I know Richard Schmid uses it. You know, two of the best painters. Richard Schmid is probably one of the best painters of my generation, and then Kylon Q is one of the best painters that I personally know, and they both use it. So I was excited about the transparent red oxide, and I bought it from Gamblin, and it was just totally different. There's kind of an orangish hue to M. Graham's transparent red oxide. And the Gamblin, I was having such a hard time in the workshop because my colors look so brown, and David Gray's flesh tones, and most of the other students, because they bought exactly what David said to buy, their flesh tones looked so perfect, and you know, pink and really like flesh tones, and my flesh tone colors that I was mixing just all look brown. And the first part of David's workshop is he uses a very limited palette with no cad red or no alizarin crimson. So I was just so stymied how he was just by using transparent red oxide, white and French ultramarine blue, he was getting these rosy flesh tones, and so it turned out to be that, you know, M. Graham's transparent red oxide is a little more redder and a little more orangier than most other brands, and that was kind of the thing. This ended up being my favorite color, and so it seemed weird to have M. Graham just for one color, and then just over time as I needed colors, I started just buying M. Graham, and that's where we're at today. I do have some other colors. So Scott Hamill, he loves this Rembrandt French ultramarine blue, and that I have a two of the M. Grahams, but this one is just so dark blue that I'm going to keep using it until I run out. I got my plein air paints right next to me, and this kind of goes with me in my plein air backpack. But so let's go through them. So for portraiture, most people don't like titanium white, but I go through so much of it, and I have so many tubes of it that I use for plein air painting that it's just easier for me to stick with a titanium white. I've tried lead white, and I've tried some other whites that aren't so strong. The problem with titanium white is it is really powerful. It really desaturates, and you really got to be careful how much you use, or your paintings. It's just obvious that you're just using too much white, and then it dries kind of chalky. There's a whole bunch of people use the word chalky for a lot of things, but it also kind of has a kind of a chalkiness when it dries. So if you use too much of it, so you got to be careful of that. Cad yellow is my yellow. It is most other cad yellows are kind of a cooler color. I don't need too much of that. I don't use too much of it. Where M. Graham's cad yellow is a little more orangier and a little more warmer, and I like that. I can make it kind of cooler and more kind of like lime colored by mixing a little bit of cerulean in there. So I use a lot more of the warm yellow than I do the cool yellow. So And that's what M. Graham's yellow is a warm yellow, and I just prefer that. I also use yellow ochre. Other brands have a golden ochre that's kind of similar, but this is kind of an earth tone, but I tend to use it a lot for blonde hair, and then I also use to make my skin tone in some areas of the face. I'll use it for that as well. I mentioned the Cad Orange. I don't use a lot of it, and I probably don't need any on my panel right now, so I'm just going to put a little dot there to remind me that's where I want it. But just a little bit of this for highlights is nice, and then also to make grays with the blue. So the complementary color of orange is blue, and the complementary color of blue is obviously orange. So if I want to gray down my blues, I have kind of a convenience color, which is this Cad Orange. I'm just putting a little placeholder there for now. I use a lot of Cad Red, and this is actually Cad Red Light. I just prefer this over Cad Red Dark. The Cad Red Dark seems so dark to me. And so this for portraiture is kind of like for, it's also a kind of a big part of my flesh tones. And then it's also, kind of the blush around the cheeks. I use it a lot. I use it a lot on lips. I use it a lot, like we talked about, kind of like where there's folds in the skin, or where the skin is thin. The skin is more transparent, so you could see basically the blood vessels. And so like any place like that, noses, ears, eyelids, things like that will have a little bit of Cad Red Light in it. I almost use no alizarin crimson for portraiture, sometimes a little bit for lipstick, and sometimes a little bit for blush, but not too often. This tube is lasting me a very, very long time. This is not permanent, alizarin crimson. I haven't read much up on it, but a big problem with alizarin crimson is over time, a long time, the strength of the color fades, and that's why some brands have a permanent version of alizarin crimson. I'm not going to be alive long enough for it to matter, but if that's something that you're concerned about, definitely look that up. Basically, the permanence of alizarin crimson. And then we've talked about it enough. I literally have 3 tubes within hand's reach of me right now of alizarin crimson. This one I don't think I've ever opened before, but I've got another tube of it right here. And why I can't find my blue is because it's up here. So let me use this blue instead of this blue. So I use 2 blues. Cerulean blue I use more for skies, and then more to desaturate my colors a little bit, especially like the oranges and the reds and that type of thing. Blue, it's kind of weird how much I use French ultramarine blue, but this is a big part of how I make my dark tones. So the 2 colors I use most in portraiture, believe it or not, are transparent red oxide and French ultramarine blue. And so all those dark areas, basically the darkest dark. So like in this photo, kind of like under her left ear, where there's that big pocket of dark, and then about 2 or 3 o'clock on her head, where the background is really dark. That's all a mixture of transparent red oxide and French ultramarine blue. And then I have a little bit of green on here, and so there is a little bit of green in the background. And to be honest with you, the main reason I have it out here is to desaturate my reds. So if I want to gray down my reds, when I say desaturate, I mean make it gray, or decrease the intensity of a color or a hue. That's what I'm talking about when I say gray down a color or desaturate a color. it's basically lowering the strength of the color. With color mixing, not to get, well, I'll make a video or something, but there's let's see, there's three things that you're concerned about. There's the hue of a color. So how red is it? How blue is it? How yellow is it? So there's the hue. So that's the color. There's the value. So that is how gray, how white to how black a color is. So there's usually a scale from 1 to 10 where the lowest value is white, and that's a 1, and then the highest value is a 10, and that's black. So there's a hue, there's the value, and then there's the brightness of a color. And brightness kind of speaks for itself, but and it is different. The brightness is different than the value. And so a big part of color mixing is basically, first thing you do is you pick a color, or you have a color that you want to lay down some paint for. Say it's, I got to figure out how to get a pointer set up on my stream so I can point to stuff. But say, let me put something down here. So say I wanted to mix the color of this handle, right? This color here that I'm pointing at. So the first thing I would do is I'd be like, well, sometimes you get lucky and it's either red, blue, or yellow. And then you're like, so what you do is, so this obviously is a little bit brown. So all of the colors mixed together kind of make that brown. So what you'll do is you'll start with, to me, it looks a little bit red. So a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and then, that's probably a little too dark. So I'll add some yellow and, so then I'll try to get the color as close as I can. And then the next thing I do is consider the value, right? Is the value right? Does it need to be more towards the white or more towards the black? And then that's usually about it. The brightness doesn't matter so much with painting. It's really just the hue and the value. But yeah, I'm so into photography that absolutely is where brightness matters. But yeah, two main things, and I'll go into it. I'll make a video or whatever. But usually when I'm mixing colors, it's like, does it need more yellow? Does it need more red? Or does it need more blue? And then, of course, over time, you'll get some convenience colors. Like with skin tones, you use a lot of a lot of the browns, I guess, or earth tones, believe it or not. So I have those out as convenience colors. I think that's all I want to say about that. I'm kind of rambling a little bit. But yeah, we'll do a tutorial on color mixing at some point. So all these tubes are all kind of crusty and stuff. It's just because I put them all in a plastic bag. So we'll get these off the table. And then I guess while we're at it, so I mentioned it before. So for my medium, it's a 1/3 walnut oil and 2/3 Gamsol. And so the consistency is like really warm syrup. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the consistency, and I really just use this to when my paint gets hard. I try not to use any of it all, and you really don't need much medium with the M. Graham colors. but I do use it a little bit. And then there's also with oil painting, after a couple days, some of the colors will kind of they'll start to dry and they'll sink into the panel or they'll sink into other colors and they get really kind of matte finish instead of shiny. And it's called oiling out. What you do is you just, you take a clean brush and you brush on some medium, and then you kind of, anything that looks like it might be runny or whatever, you kind of blot off with a paper towel. But the last painting that we did, I think we did it in five sittings, so there wasn't really much of a need to oil it out. But I'll show you in a couple days when that painting of Anna dries a little bit. What I'll do is when I varnish it, you could really see how matte the finish gets on it. And then, so anyways, a third of, and if you use linseed oil, that's fine too, but it's about a third linseed oil. In my case, a third walnut oil, and 2/3 Gamsol. And then that's what my solvent or my brush cleaner is Gamsol. And that pretty much you could get Gamsol anywhere, and there's no smell. It's called odorless mineral spirits, and it's pretty odorless. I recycle my Gamsol. You don't want to put that kind of thing down the drain, and it's so easy to recycle it. What you do is you just put the dirty Gamsol in a like a mason jar. And like in a day, all the paint and stuff will settle to the bottom, and then you could just pour the clean Gamsol back into your solvent tank. But where I'm going with this is, it seems like after a while, I don't know, it must have something to do with the paint, but sometimes the smell will change and be a little funky. I will say, even though Gamsol is an odorless mineral spirit, you should work in a well ventilated area. It's not good for you. And I have my dog he's laying down next to me or whatever. It can't be good for pets either. I don't have any scientific evidence of this, but it is a solvent, and it really can't be good for you or your pets. And that's why I started wearing. I'm opening my door now that I'm thinking about it, but yeah, it is a solvent. It really, too much of it can't be good for you. 1 second, I'm opening my door. Get a little ventilation going, like I said. All right. So let's get started, I guess. Well, something I do, most people don't like how white this background is. It doesn't bug me too bad. But what a lot of people do, and I guess I'll do it too, is they put down a thin layer, usually of like a brown or pretty much anything, just to knock down the white. So why don't we start with that? So you're really just going to apply it and then pull it back off. So I usually use pretty much my standard, a little bit of red oxide and a little bit of French ultramarine blue. And for this, I do use some solvent to get it really runny, because we're going to move this all over the board. And make sure this is tied down. And this is really just to knock down the white. Some people like Kai, and me sometimes as well. This is how they'll start their painting. They won't wipe this off, but David Gray, he does wipe it off, and he actually makes sure that it's quite dry. And the reason he puts a ground, it's called a ground, I guess, or some people call it a ground, is so that they can use Gamsol on a paper towel, and for their lights of their underpainting, they can just clean out a spot. I'll show you how to do that when we get to it. This, you don't have to be precious at all. You're really just kind of going to cover it. And I think I even got enough on there to do what I want to do. So now that I put all that on there, get a paper towel, you wipe it all back off. Some people, I was watching a YouTube video the other day, a lot of like ateliers and a lot of like classically trained artists, they'll use things like my surface is a board, but what they'll do is they'll use tea to stain their canvas. They'll make a pot of tea and they'll take a brush and dip it in the tea, and they'll basically paint their canvas with the tea, and then they'll do just like me, what I'm doing now, and they'll wipe it all back off. This, I can take or leave. I'm just doing it to kind of demonstrate what most people do. I'm used to, I paint so much outside, and I seem to never have enough time because I'm usually hosting the event or I'm late. So I never have time to really do this step. So now, like, if you wanted to make a highlight somewhere, what you could do is you could take a little bit of Gamsol, either on your brush or a paper towel, and you basically, that would be a highlight. And I don't do the Q-tip thing. A lot of people use Q-tips, and they'll basically draw with the Q-tip, kind of on the ground. Not really my thing. Again, I don't seem to ever make time for it. This is a new rare thing where I can start a painting knowing that it's going to take 4 or 5 sessions over a week to finish. I've literally been missing this trash can and basically throwing my tissues on the floor. I'm going to have to clean that up. I don't know how that happened. All right. So in a perfect world, I know David Gray, like he'll wipe this down until it's super, super dry. But I do want to paint a little bit tonight, or at least get started on a sketch. And since I don't care, that's what we're going to do. So for the sketching part, I kind of like something that I can make some lines with. They don't have to be that sharp, but... All right. I almost want... Well, maybe not this time, but I would kind of like to show you what I'm measuring. Let's see. Can't really do that. But maybe for next time I'll show you basically what I'm measuring. But let's get started. So again, my 2 favorite colors I'm going to mix together. A little bit of red oxide, a little bit of ultramarine blue. And so I'm going to measure So some important things to me that I try not to move is obviously the top of the head. You guys see that? That's just out of the screen. So I got about a half inch above that of space. It's probably about right. So I measure the top of the head, and then the chin is a little bit left or a little bit right of center. So the top of the head and the bottom, the lowest part on the chin is a little bit right of center. And then she does have a tilt, but so I'll measure that. This is kind of like the top of her forehead. That's my dog whining. I don't know what that's all about. And then I kind of care about the tilt, so I'll make a line for that. And then what I'll start to do is I'll measure things, and I'll try not to move these lines either. So as much as possible, you don't want to move them, because then what happens is you're kind of chasing around a portrait. It's probably less important when you have when you're painting from a photograph like I am, but it's important to not chase or move your reference points when you're doing a painting from life or a live model. So, and I won't get too crazy, but I'll make a couple lines like where her hair parts and stuff. And then, let's see. You can't see it, but I'm doing a little measuring. So, yeah, I gotta figure out a way to make a pointer or something so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Or, let me try one thing. Make it back up a little bit. Bear with me, I'm looking at my settings. Let's see. I've got my palette camera. Show all scenes. Ooh, here we go. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if that's the best experience for you guys. I'm gonna totally get rid of that. Right. All right. So what we've got here, so this is the bottom of her chin. This is the top of her hairline. This is the top of her head. And I know that it's a little bit skewed, um, but I think showing you how I measure is probably more important. So what I'm measuring is from the bottom of her chin to the bottom of her nose, and then I'm seeing where that ends up. So that's kind of takes us to like the top of basically her eyebrow ridge, and then if we go from there, it's just a little bit higher than where her hairline is. So let's do the same, right? So we've got to guess a little bit. So if I say, let's start there and see what happens. So there to there. And I think that's actually pretty good. So if I say that's the bottom of her nose, that's her eyebrows, and then we're just a little bit deep into her hairline. And that's kind of what we had before. So why don't we, I have a little measuring stick that I use. So let's do it again. So my little measuring stick, I'm going to go a little bit lower here. So I'm going to go here. Get some paint on there. This is for your benefit. I don't really do this much anymore, but so if we go there, this would be your eyebrows. And then, like I said, a little bit into her hairline. So we're there, but we only want to be about that high. So this would be the bottom of her nose. Let's make sure that we're still aligned. All right, so that's the bottom of her nose. This is her brow line. The very top of her brow line. Keep in mind, her head is definitely tilted a little bit. You might not be able to see it so great, but we want to make sure that we keep all those things parallel. So the top of her brow line, including her eyes, her nose, her chin, we want to keep all that stuff parallel. And so the next thing that we look at is, so now that we know how, so this is kind of where her hairline is. That's where the line ended up, but this is where her hairline starts, kind of in this area. So what we want to see is, that's a little bit too short, but what is the height of her, basically the mask of her face versus the width. So I usually start with the width and see how that matches along her face. So the width of her face, kind of from the widest parts, and it's just a little bit of upper nose. Oops, not helpful. Is again to the bottom of her chin to the top of the bridge of her eyes. And when you do this, you want to hold your arm out straight so that you always are measuring kind of from the same distance. And then you want to measure a couple times. So from her eyebrows to the bottom of her chin is the same distance as the widest parts of her face, which is right across her nose there. So I need to get something longer to do that measurement. So that distance from her eyebrows to the bottom of her chin, across that area there, is about that wide. And then make that shape, and then I try to do just straight lines at this point. this kind of thing will change a lot, but do the best that you can. I've mentioned it before, you can't fix it if you don't put it on the canvas. So get something on the canvas. And so the other thing that you want to keep in mind is the distance. So the distance between the tear duct and the edge of the eye is usually the same distance between the two eyes, and then obviously again for the second eye. And then you kind of want to keep in mind that gap there. So let's just start somewhere. I think it's roughly there and there. Keep in mind that center line. Keep in mind that you want to stay parallel. All right. So then let's use this distance as our measurement. So if that is the width, and we come over here, that's a little too wide. So let's move it in a little bit. So those distances, let's take a look at that. That's a little more like it. Maybe a little wider. Let's go out to here. Move that out a little bit. All right. I need some more paper towels. I used more paper towels cleaning off this board than I did my entire last painting. All right, so what else? So I usually let that settle in a little bit. I'll kind of draw the rest of it a little bit. I'll look at these lines again. All right, remember this is the bottom of her nose. Maybe the wings of her nose. Where do the wings of her nose are usually kind of where the tear ducts are. So kind of in this area. No detail. We're just kind of roughing things out, getting something on the canvas so that we could fix it later. Protect this edge here, protect this edge here, even though, you know, we've got some hair coming down, we still know that it's there. Those eyebrows get pretty low, but can you guys even see that? Yeah. Let's take some measurements for her lips. So if we go from the bottom of the nose to the top of her lip and then go down from there, it's about the same distance as from the top of her lip to the bottom of her lip. So we'll go top of the nose, top of the lip to the bottom of the lip, and then we've got about 2 more of those for the whole length of her chin. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to clean that off. So we got to divide this into 4. So there'll be 3 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. So halfway, it's actually a little higher than halfway. Yeah, so halfway is basically the bottom of her lip. So that's about here. That's about the top of her lip. And then this would be her chin. Keep in mind. So and then measure again. This would be kind of a plumb line. So kind of in where her iris would be. I know we didn't measure that, but that looks about right. This is kind of where her iris would be. Would be how wide her lip is. And then the same with check, you got to check both sides. So again, so where her iris would be is where her lip would end. All right. Again, I'll just draw that for your benefit. Oh, and I might have to look this up. I think it's called a Van Dyke Z. So it's a Z where your eyebrow kind of connects. So your eyebrow would connect kind of here, and then goes down here, and then goes across here. So that's another tool that you could use. I'll look it up and I'll be sure to correct it if it's wrong. But then same with, so her Z goes here, here, and here. We can compare that later. I think her lips are a little bit wider and narrower. Remember, this line was the top of her eyebrow, so probably don't want to get above that. All right. We're not going to lay down any color today, but when I look at that, it kind of makes sense. Got this cool curl here. Just got this. Is actually light. Comes around. Now what I might do is maybe a little more refining. So maybe I would usually use a flat for this, but looks like our measurements aren't too bad. So what I'll do is I'll probably re-establish this line. And then what I'll do is I'll get a little more serious about my waypoints. And kind of redraw some of this stuff. And then measure, so to start that in a little bit. There, there. So, there to there. There, there. And you may do this, put in kind of some placeholders for her iris, and you might be, oh, that immediately looks wonky. You're usually right. If it feels weird, it's probably not right. So if you got to get up and take a few steps back, or if you need to measure again, now's the time to do it. Got that hair that comes around. Also start kind of making the shape of the face. I could tell. Trust your lines that you made earlier. It makes no sense to do all that measuring and then ignore the lines. So what I'm talking about is, remember I said this is the very top of her brow. It would make no sense for her eyebrow to go over that. And this sucks. I mean, this is why, probably part of the reason why a lot of people don't oil paint is because this is time consuming and it's kind of fidgety and rigorous, and this brush is terrible. I'm having a hard time with it. Yeah, let me get something else. Let's see what we got. I don't want to use my new favorite brush because this is the kind of thing that wrecks a brush. But let's try this one. Make sure your stuff is parallel still. Your lines are parallel. This line here. And then use the negative space. So like this big black area here, it's kind of like an upside down spade or an upside down heart. Use that as well. I mean, it looks like it kind of starts here, comes around, and ends. Doesn't quite get to her chin. It kind of goes to this brown part of her chin. So that's not bad. It actually connects down here on her neck though. So put that in there. So this is all going to be black. Getting ahead of myself, you probably, till the line drawing is good, you probably shouldn't do any blocking like this, but and then this kind of comes down like this. And this comes down like that. This is actually really narrow through here. I like it, I like it. Sure, it kind of comes here. I did crop, so this is 11 by 14 panel, and I did crop this image 11 by 14. So what we got? Past an hour. So this is at a point where I'd probably stop and do some measuring. So we're at the point now where like I would start doing a block in. I'm not really a big underpainting person. This is really all I need to get started usually. But I think that's a pretty good starting spot. Those eyes are probably a little too big. till this brow line comes down a little lower. This brow, not brow line, but eyebrow comes down a little bit lower. Those wings on there. I've got too much Gamsol on this brush and that's why it's running, but I love this little some things that I look for. I mean, we can measure, let's double check again. So remember we said bottom of the chin to the bottom of her nose is the same distance as the bottom of her nose to her brow. That looks good. The brow, whoops. The brow kind of goes just up a little bit into her widow's peak here. So let's just see how we did. See if we didn't screw anything up. So bottom of the chin, bottom of the nose is the same distance to the brow line. That looks good. And then this goes just a little bit up into the widow's peak a little bit. That might be a little bit too low, but we could fix that. And then the other measurement that we did was the let's see, we had to get a longer brush. So the bottom of the chin to the brow is the same distance as her face at the widest point, which was just a little bit above, well, kind of the center of her nose, which we might be a little bit, well, let's check here first. So, switch hands. Bottom of the chin to the brow is the same distance. So I might be a little narrower on her face, right? Because it's definitely the same width as that height. But when I go here to the brow, and then I go here, so it's kind of here. So I got to be careful of that, my big wide lines, right? So it's kind of there to there. So maybe I'm a little bit wide. So what I would do in this case, not with this brush, but a soft clean brush, I would take a little Gamsol and then widen that back out. There we go. So widen, that's obviously probably not right. And then same on this side, I would widen that back out a little bit. Because remember, this is our center line. That center line is a little bit left, but not so far left. And I would widen this back out just a touch. This is her hair, so I'm going to leave that alone. But I'm going to widen that out just a touch. And let's measure again. Bottom of the chin to the brow, to the widest part, and that's more like it. You got to be mindful of this part is pretty wide here, and then this part kind of goes wide again, like where her ear starts. So, and that's fine. I mean, maybe her face isn't so thick like that. You know, maybe we have to carve that down a little bit. You know, this, we've got this lovely curl. And then we've got the shadow that goes down here, right? So that kind of makes a little bit of an illusion. Oopsie, sorry about that. My dog's awake now. But check this again. I might just knock that down a little bit just so. In case I have to change it, there's no ripples. No ripples or edges. But I think that's it. I mean, as far as the drawing, so this is at a point where I'm going to double check my measurements when I'm off camera, just to double check. But this is typically where I would just start painting. All right. Let's clean our brushes a little bit. And then since I'm in no hurry, like I don't have to, I'm going to try to do an hour a day of painting with you all. And I'm going to try to just paint this with you on camera. I'm in no hurry to get started jumping into color. So take a day, do some measuring. I might do a little measuring before it dries tonight, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That's kind of how I measure, how I get started. I think I showed you I also use my iPad in Procreate to measure or to double check my measurements, so I might do that as well. But that's pretty much it. That's, I think, where I'm going to end it tonight. Thank you everyone for joining me. I got to work 2/3 of a day tomorrow, and then I'm actually hosting portrait painting tomorrow night, so definitely getting enough painting in the next 2 days. But I will also live stream at some point tomorrow. But yeah, I'll probably share. We've got a really handsome, somewhat famous model who's he's a traveling model from Italy. I've painted him before. His name's Giuseppe. And boy, he's about as Italian as it gets. And I'm a heterosexual man, but he is a beautiful man himself. So I'm looking forward to painting him and seeing him again. And so I'll share that painting with you, whether it's good or bad. And then hopefully share something. Well, I might talk, instead of maybe painting tomorrow, I might jump on for a little bit and then talk about the session that we had. It gets done at 9:30 or whatever, so it might be a late one. But yeah, that might be something that we do, is talk about my plein air painting. And then if there's time, we'll paint a little bit. But all right, folks. Well, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful Thursday night, and we'll see you tomorrow.